of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Chistro. Chapter 20. Boss Sama. As 1400 approached, he'd insisted that they all have lunch, just a few sandwiches, nothing fancy, and ice cream under the shade of the umbrellas. He'd offered everyone the chance to go inside the cafe, however. They'd all been having such a great time outside that they'd decided to stay there. One of the only good things about being in such a built-up area, he supposed, was the lack of insects to bother them. Then, after they'd eaten, the pros had insisted on taking the plates, bowls, and glasses back inside for him. They'd spotted Domra and Davi playing their game and wanted to say hi, too. Shouta was going to allow the kids to drag him into the pools to play a game on the condition that they all topped up their sunscreen first. Some sighing, some more than happy to ask their guardians, and others insisting, "Oh, I can do it myself, Ma!" The cafe owner approached Doji, whose mother, despite the invitation, had yet to show. Inko had whispered to him that she'd be taking the top back home with her to read manga with Izuku, bless her heart, with a bottle in hand.
"Would you like some help?"
Smiling up at him, the expression a little shy, the boy nodded as he crouched down to the kid's height and carefully applied a few smears of the white substance across warm cheeks, his forehead, and down the bridge of his nose.
Nothing like a bit of war paint, huh?
He chuckled. At the boy's giggle, he carefully massaged the lotion in, being sure to get just close enough to the other's eyes to ensure protection, but nowhere near the lashes so he wouldn't blink some in, before turning his attention to little arms and legs. They shared the same natural pallor, so he was glad the boy had kept his shirt on with his shorts. If the child got sunburn or heat stroke, then he'd never forget himself.
There you go, well done.
He smiled before standing, his legs about to approach the pools. Izuku and Denki were already splashing about with Tsuyu, who was smiling like it was going out of style, whilst he inspected the hoses, which he'd turned back on to fill the paddling pools with clean, fresh water, before a cough, as of giggles, stopped him. Shouta! We can use some help too, since you're offering? Blinking, his brows rising incredulously. The eraser quirk user regarded the pros crowding his personal space, whilst the parents continued to look on and titter. Sighing, because the three did look a little red across their muscular shoulders, and they had been delighting everyone with their antics. He assumed that they weren't on patrol. He waved them over to one of the free chairs and rolled his eyes as the men high-fived, whilst Midnight squealed, "Me first!" God, were they all supposed to be older than him? Even the kids, squirting each other as they were with the pistols he'd told them to keep. Katsuki and Ejiro, however, were full-on trying to dunk each other in the second largest pool whilst their mothers cheered them on. The apples hadn't fallen far from the trees there, had they? Even they were behaving more rationally. Now, well, he couldn't have them burning, he supposed. "Oh, that feels wonderful. Oh, there. Please stop making this weird." He upped his creamed hands, carefully applying a thin layer of the protective substance across her shoulders. He'd insisted that she held her masses of lustrous hair up so that her own hands couldn't grab at him, his fingers working in it as she hummed. "Oh, you're really good at that, Shouchan." Grumbling to himself, he carefully finished off her back before sending her, with a pout, away. He just knew that the other heroes were taking photos alongside a deviously grinning meat skates. Wonderful. Birthday! Having the blonde similarly keep his hair out of the way, Shouta got to work, and it suited him so much better down. However, he supposed that the outlandish style that the Jedi man sported was more to do with his costume, or perhaps a way to have long hair that'd be more difficult to grab. Either explanation was irrational, wasn't it? Considering Present Mike was definitely slenderer than Loud Cloud, the muscles of his neck, shoulders, and back were actually very defined. Not bad. Midnight wasn't kidding! You could charge people for this kind of treatment and know that I'm fake! And just like that, his admiration died.
"Shut up."
He sniped before, with a huff, he shoved the snickering man out of the chair. His hands, damn, he nearly dropped the bottle since his ditches were so slippery, applying a good dollop of cream to his palms as a definitely pleased-looking cloud quirk user slipped into the chair, his smile luminous as he waved at his hands. "Thanks for this, by the way." Blinking, his hands rounding over broad sun-kissed shoulders, that were sculpted and firm. It might be worth starting to use him as a sparring partner in the adult classes, mightn't it? Before easing up the other's neck, his irises taking in the fine white blue-tinted hair, which mimicked the nimbus the older man could manipulate, Shouta hummed.
It'd be illogical not to help you.
He shrugged. No, that's not what I meant. The other chuckled, his head turning to slant that gentle smile at him. You and your cafe haven't even been here for 2 months, and yet all of these changes? The crime rate deteriorating, those thugs getting locked up, and the low-ranking villains not bothering people as much, I mean, he added. Just look at these kids, these people. They're from all walks of life, or from different areas across the city, but here they are, he sighed. My cousin is one of the middle schoolers who's being tutored by an MU student, too. She's doing real well and is so much happier in school. I just hope that you know how much we appreciate everything you've put into motion, you know?
As cynical as I may look, it sounds sometimes.
He mused, his hands reaching for one of the towels he'd brought to the outside area to wipe off the excess lotion.
I am a firm believer in the inherent goodness of people,
he admitted mildly.
That is not that I don't appreciate your compliments of the sentiment behind it,
he furthered when the other turned to probably regard him.
But these changes were only started in part by me. The people did the rest,
he reminded.
Human beings have only survived this long due to our mutual desire to cooperate,
he reasoned.
Sometimes people forget that, so after a little nudge, well, here we are.
He mused, his own smile forming.
Think about it, looks as though your friend needs your help.
He chuckled whilst pointing toward the largest pool where Katsuki and Ejiro, along with Denki, had decided that President Mike was an easy target to ground. Whoa! This little hero's in the making mean business, huh? The taller man laughed before getting up, and to his bewildered surprise, the tallest bro quickly snagged his hand to drag him along. We're coming, Mike! And he had them pulled away. Waving the children goodbye, it had just turned 15:10, and he'd need to set up for the adult classes soon. Their parents bowing and giving their thanks as they went, Shouta offered his own gratitude to the pros as they started emptying the pools and deflating them. You know, today has definitely made one of my top 10 Sundays. No, top 5! The voice quirk user grinned. You're gonna keep doing this, right, chum?
I don't see why not.
He smiled, grabbing the hem of his thoroughly soaked t-shirt to pull it up over his head, his hands wringing it out and giving it a shake before laying it out on the high sidewalk. It had been clinging to him, which was beyond annoying. But then he let it dry soon. Blinking as he stood with a stretch. He'd have to start detaching the hoses from the wall and wrapping them up soon, so it was a good idea to roll his shoulders a bit first. The eraser quirk user looked at the pros, his head cocked to the side as they stared at him.
What?
He asked.
Do I have tan lines or something?
He furthered, his eyes looking down at the defined six-pack he sported before looking to his biceps. He couldn't see any such lines. Was it the few scars he had? There weren't many. 2 across his chest, 1 slit across his abdomen, and a star-shaped one on his collarbone. Plus, he didn't think that they were particularly prominent, and were such things really so unusual? Wouldn't they have scars too? You have... Midnight tried, her hands cupping her face as she blushed and flailed around on the spot. Well, she was allegedly a masochist, so...
These are just scrapes I got from some upperclassmen when I was in middle school, that's all.
He shrugged mildly before grabbing one of his basic baubles from his board shorts pockets, his hands shoving his drying hair, the hands were tickling his damp shoulders, it was annoying, up into a messy bun, because he wasn't here to impress anybody. Then, his hands grabbing a beach ball, he removed the stopper and squished the air out, his eyebrows lifting again when he noticed that the pros were continuing to look at him with gawping expressions, their eyes almost comically wide. Were they quivering?
Are you okay?
He tried.
You've all gone red in the face. Mike Clown, are your noses bleeding? Do you need to sit down in the shader?
Oi! Blinking, his head snapping back to where the cafe's entrance was, he found his brows lifting higher as Davy stormed towards them, a beach towel in hand.
What's...
Stop salivating all over my boss, you bunch of perverts! Bo, he's just so... He's not here to be gawked at, is he? Have some respect and get some tissues to clean yourselves up with, for fuck's sake! Grunting when the towel was literally thrown over him before his hand was grabbed, Shouta tried to sputter something out whilst the young man tugged him back towards his eatery.
We'll take care of the rest of this stuff, so thanks,
And get lost until it's time for your lesson later, my god! Snickering, because what his employee had accused them of was ridiculous, but similarly incredibly sweet. He'd never had anyone try to defend his chastity before. The cafe owner used his free hand to tuck the fluffy fabric off of his head, his face turning back to the stupefied, guilty-looking pros as he gave them a reassuring wave. How very strange. How ridiculously illogical. And maybe if he was honest, just a little flattering too. Sunday evening came and went without too much of a hitch. The pros had apologized to him. He'd told them that such a thing was unnecessary, but accepted it. They'd apologized to Dobby too, which had been fun to watch, whilst he'd sneered, huffed, and warned them to be respectful or else. And the lessons had run smoothly. When Inko had joined the later adult class with Izuku and Hitoshi, however, he'd started to worry. Shinso-san hadn't answered the woman's calls or her son's texts either. She'd wanted to walk the boy to his mother's apartment, but was worried that she wouldn't be there. Trying to keep the iris-haired boy distracted and worry-free had been difficult. Acknowledging the situation, he'd approached the boy, who'd run into his arms for a hug the second he crouched down to check on him, to see how he was and what action he wanted them to take. Sadly, his mother being MIA wasn't exactly rare, was it? After a quick chat, they'd decided to run the session. She might have been on her way, or her cell phone could have died, couldn't it? And gone together to investigate. His employee had insisted on going as well, just to be safe. Tomura had already gone home for the evening, after all. Luckily, once they'd knocked on the apartment's paint-chipped door, Kimiko had answered, wrapped her son in a hug, and profusely apologized. She'd been in talks with the landlord for most of the afternoon, she said, and had finally been able to pay the cantankerous but fair, from what he'd heard, old lady who owned the place every yen she owed. Feeling relieved but politely declining the offer of tea, the Midoriyas were going to stay with them a while. It was wonderful to see Hitoshi's mother being taken under the green-haired woman's kindly wing. He and Dami had made their way back to the cafe. They'd both clocked a couple of men watching them from a shadowy stairwell. However, since they'd not been approached by the posse, 5 in total, he made a point of remembering their faces and the scowls that marred them. He led his young friend, who may or may not have purposely set his hair into a blue halo of flames, back to their home.
Well, that was quite a day, wasn't it?
He mused whilst they ate an evening meal together in the cafe's kitchen, the bread makers merrily churning and kneading dough in the background, whilst the clothes dryer thumped and tumbled aprons as towels, and the freshly washed board shorts and t-shirt he had been wearing.
So, any word about a date yet?
What? So asks the guy who's building a harem? The other huffed with a blush, his chopsticks busily digging into his favorite style of yakisoba to avoid truly answering. Aizawa had made it for him as a special thank you for his early act of chivalry. The teen had laughed snorted at him when he'd curtsied and presented the dish. It was wonderful to see him so happy, so hopeful for the future. And sure, he wasn't a mind reader or someone like Sir Night-Eye who could see the future, but something was telling him that Tomura and Dobby would be all the better for being in each other's company. Harem, he mused, his own noodles all but gone. The premium soy sauce he'd purchased was worth every cent, wasn't it?
I haven't got the time to run and manage such a thing on top of the cafe now, do I? I guess I'll have to get All Might in on the action and use his money and resources to set up a schedule or something.
He grinned with a snicker, the flame quirk user nearly choking on his mouthful. Bastard! The leaner man finally laughed after a gulp of lemonade, his expression incredulous before it became sneakily, suspiciously contemplative. Oh, how do you suppose a guy of that size, gets off? I mean, if he's anatomically correct and to scale, well, that's a whole lot of dick, isn't it? Finding that it was his turn to choke. God, he should not have started this teasing match, should he? He was clearly and woefully unprepared to go up against a teenager, wasn't he? Shouta had to wipe his tearing eyes as he coughed. Damn, it felt good to laugh like this, though, didn't it? Boss Sama thought of himself as a legitimate, albeit illegal, businessman. He had been running his girls and a few select boys because money was money, and what his clientele wanted, his clientele got on this block for 5 years now. He had the prettiest pieces of flesh you were likely to find, this said Musatafu. His prices were reasonable, for the most part. Similarly, his 3 brothels were secret, safeguarded, and secure. Oh yes, so long as you had the yen, didn't knock the sluts around too much, and behave yourselves on the premises. No pissing on the beds, no drunken fights, and no drug use. Well, not unless you purchased the drugs from him or one of his associates on site. Then you were welcome in any of his discreet houses of pleasure.
I'm roaming around the area again today. Huh.
But how had he managed to keep his establishments undetected by the law for so long? Why did he come out on top when many of his competitors failed? Well, as a shrewd, business-minded man he was, there were 2 very good answers to that question. Yes, Boss Sama, they've been patrolling more often too, and we've spotted 5 more pros sniffing about as well. The first, shopping the scummy low-life bastards who claimed to be pimps, and setting the cups on them, and picking out the nicest of their wares to entice his own customers with, to boot, was relatively easy. He actually owned a small pachinko bar on the other side of town, so he appeared like just another concerned citizen. Plus, most of the police around these parts were a bunch of overstretched fools, so he could deal with them easily enough. Especially in this shit stain of an area. A bribe here, a girl selling the bird there, a sample of some party upper or another, and poof! All of his competition had flittered away like so much trash in the wind.
Much money are down by.
The second? No pro-hero was going to be thanked, applauded, or paid well for wasting their time on these crack rundown streets. He never liked the assholes, and thanks to him being so mindful, none had deigned to give the 2 or 3 square miles he operated in a second look.
About 30,000 yen, sir.
Until now! Until a certain long-haired, curiously popular son of a bitch had rocked up and turned the grimy, fearful little den of iniquity he'd been building into a place where people like to come. Where pros like to come. And pros made his clients jumpy. It made them scared. It made them not visit his places of business. God, it made him sick to his stomach.
30,000 yen, you say?
It made him fucking furious! He muttered his wolf's maw, gritting down on the cigar hanging to the side of his brown-furred snout, his vermilion irises narrowing around the black slits of his pupils, his thick, bushy tail giving an irritated slap against the cushions of the overly stuffed couch he was lounging in.
Well, we can't have that now, can we?
He sighed.
So, you're certain that our dear sweet Shinso-san is one of his simpering little charity cases?
Yes, sir. One of his most trusted lieutenants replied before showing him a selection of images on the tablet he proffered of the dusky purple-haired woman who had handed in her week's notice to him that very afternoon. And there, just as he asked for, he could see her, one of his most popular, until the bitch had had the audacity to quit now that she'd paid off her debts. She was going to work at that cafe. Apparently, the mysterious Aizawa-san had already offered her a place of business. Walking to and from the Norneko, sometimes with that freaky bride of hers in tow. He'd had cats enough before that wretched place had opened, and its little shit of an owner had cleared out his cousin's, stupidly named, you could admit that much, menagerie gang because they'd been too drunk to realize that the arrogant prick didn't have muscles just for the hell of it. No, he'd watched the bastard run those self-defense classes of his. He'd seen the growing confidence of the men and women he was helping, too. How one of his more idiotic, he didn't move against people in broad daylight, for fuck's sake, because that was just begging for trouble. Cronies had been arrested by 2 fucking salarymen when he tried to rob them last week.
What do you want us to do, Boss Emma?
Sucking in a deep breath of rich cloying smoke, the wolf-quirk man sighed.
Get the man on the phone,
he ordered, his smile broadening into something truly terrible.
I think this Aizawa-san and I need to have a little chat, don't you?